At 3:17 p.m., July 14, 2007, Port of Miami, Florida, the summer heat shimmered off the asphalt as families pulled rolling suitcases toward the towering hull of the Caribbean Dream, a mid-size cruise ship destined for Nassau and Cozumel. Seagulls circled overhead, their screams fusing with the buzz of excited passengers and the rhythmic roar of the ship's horn. David Leslie, 43, a real estate broker from Tallahassee. His wife Karen, 41, a part-time nurse, and their two daughters, Cynthia, 16, strode a few feet forward, earphones plugged in, her denim backpack slung over one shoulder. Her younger sister, Lena, 11, skipped next to their mother, clutching a stuffed dolphin she'd insisted on taking. This was their first cruise, a celebration of David's promotion and a rare week away from Bill's errands, a departure from the unrelenting boredom of Florida summer. Karen stopped at the gangway to take a picture. Cynthia rolled her eyes but grinned anyway. Lena waved at the camera, gum burnished from the morning at the beach. "1 week, no work emails, no drama, just us," David said as he embraced Karen's shoulder. Karen pecked his cheek. Legendary final words. They burst out laughing. None of them saw the deckhand observing from the top rail, or the way he turned away when Cynthia glanced up. The Leslie family had unpacked in cabin 9D, a confined interior room with 2 bunk beds and a porthole window that wouldn't open. By the time the ship left port at 5:42 p.m., Cynthia grabbed the top bunk and plugged in her phone right away. Annoyed there was no signal, Lena spread her coloring books on the cramped desk. Karen reminded them both to be at the muster station by 6 for the mandatory safety drill. David was already studying the daily activity schedule, circling things in pen. Karaoke night, mini golf, midnight buffet. He wanted to do it all. That evening, the family ate together at the Leo Deck Buffet, sharing a table near the pool with another family from Nassau. Cynthia texted her boyfriend back home, exasperated by the delay. The ship's Wi-Fi was inconsistent at best. Karen and David were exhausted by 9:30 p.m. and went to the cabin. Cynthia asked whether she could go for a walk along the deck or perhaps grab a smoothie. David paused, but Karen pushed him. "She's 16. Let her stretch her legs. Just be back by 11. Cynthia nodded and walked, Lena trailing behind her like a shadow. "Can I come?" Lena questioned. Cynthia sighed, but she did not say no. They descended the hallway toward the open-air deck where the evening breeze smelled of salt and diesel, past rows of identical cabin doors. That was the last time their parents saw them. 7:48 a.m., July 15, 2007. Cabin 9D, Caribbean Dream. Karen awoke to calm. The bunk beds were unoccupied. Cynthia's phone was charging, plugged into the wall. Lena's dolphin sat propped on the pillow. David? The bathroom. Nothing. He opened the cabin door and searched down the corridor, thinking they would be coming from breakfast. The hallway was vacant. Karen was at the guest services desk by 8:15, her voice trembling. "My daughters did not return last evening. We must locate them immediately." The crew started to search deck by deck, room by room, storage closets, laundry facilities, even the engine compartments. Announcements were made over the PA system asking Cynthia and Lena Leslie to report to the purser's office. 2 inspections had been conducted on the ship by noonday. No witnesses, no evidence of either girl, no CCTV tape proving anything conclusive. The last verified sighting was near the rear observation platform at 9:47 p.m., seen swiftly on a corridor camera. Cynthia and Lena were walking side by side, chatting, and then they vanished around a corner. After that, there was silence. When the Caribbean Dream arrived in Nassau on July 16th, officials from the Bahamas came on board. The FBI was informed. The Coast Guard began a search and rescue mission looking over the route the ship traveled between Miami and Nassau. Divers checked the water close to the port. They found nothing. David and Karen were let off the ship in a daze, holding a stuffed dolphin and Cynthia's phone. A spokesperson from the Coast Guard spoke briefly to the press on the pier. "We are considering this as a case of the missing person. Right now, we don't have any signs of illegal activity, but we are looking into all options. However, for anyone who knew the Leslie family, the official words felt empty. Two sisters couldn't just disappear from a busy cruise ship in the vast ocean. Someone must have seen something. Someone had to know. And 8 years later, a retired deckhand in a storage unit outside Jacksonville would give over a VHS tape that would change everything people thought they understood about that night. But at that moment, all that was left were 2 unoccupied beds, a charging phone, and a mother's cry echoing across the dock. July 16, 2007, 10:22 a.m. At the FBI office in Miami, Florida. Special Agent Nicole Brennan was sitting with David and Karen Leslie in a small interview room that had no windows and smelled like burnt coffee and cleaning supplies. Karen's hand shook as she held a wrinkled tissue. David was staring at the table with his jaw so tight it looked like it might break. Brennan had done many interviews about missing people in her 12 years at the Bureau, but there was something unique about this case. The timeline was too perfect and the disappearance was too total. She opened her notebook and clicked her pen. "I need you to tell me everything again, starting from when you got on the ship." Karen's voice cracked as she replied. "We were celebrating. David got a promotion."
We had never gone on a cruise before. The girls were thrilled. Lena wouldn't stop mentioning the dolphins we could see. She paused, wiping away her tears. Cynthia acted like she didn't care, but I noticed her smile when we arrived at the cabin. She really liked the bunk beds, David said. We all had dinner together at the buffet on the Leo deck. Lena made a new friend, a kid from Georgia. They were laughing and making napkin designs. Cynthia spent most of her time on her phone, texting her boyfriend back home. Brennan asked, "Do you remember his name?" "Tyler," Karen replied right away. "Tyler Marsh. They've been going out for about 6 months. He's a senior at Leon High. He's a good kid. His parents know us." Brennan nodded. And after dinner, David sighed deeply. Karen and I were really tired. We headed back to the cabin around 9:30. Cynthia wanted to walk around the deck for a little while. I was hesitant to let her go, but Karen reminded me she's 16 and needs some freedom, so I agreed. "Be back by 11, I told her, my voice cracking. Lena wanted to join her. Cynthia didn't object. They left together. Karen hid her face in her hands. "I should have said no. I should have made them stay in the room. This is my fault." Brennan leaned in, speaking firmly but gently. "Mrs. Leslie, this isn't your fault. You couldn't have known. No parent could." But Karen wasn't really hearing her. She was lost in her thoughts, wishing she could go back and make a different choice. Brennan spent the next 2 hours taking notes, snapping photos, and asking for phone records. She reached out to the Tallahassee Police Department to set up an interview with Tyler Marsh. She looked over the ship's passenger list and checked names against criminal records. Nothing unusual came up. There were no registered sex offenders or anyone with a history of harming kids. The crew cooperated, but seemed a bit on edge. The captain, a tough-looking guy named Robert Finch, claimed his ship was safe. "We run a solid operation. This has never happened before in 23 years. But Brennan knew that never didn't mean much when kids went missing. July 17, 2007, 2:34 p.m. The Caribbean Dream docked at the port of Miami. The investigation was still ongoing. Brennan got onto the ship with a forensic team. They looked for fingerprints, hair, and anything else that could give them clues in cabin 9D. Cynthia's phone was taken and sent to the FBI's tech team for investigation. Lena's stuffed dolphin was carefully packed as evidence, even though Brennan disliked the idea of it being stuck in a storage place instead of hugged by a frightened little girl. They made a copy of the ship's security videos and organized them. Brennan spent a lot of time watching the recordings, going through each frame. The video quality was bad and blurry, like outdated equipment that hadn't been improved for years. But he could still see Cynthia and Lena walking together in the hallway at 9:47 p.m. Cynthia had her hair covering part of her face. Lena was lively, talking and using her hands. They turned a corner towards the back observation deck. The next camera near the pool didn't catch them at all. Brennan looked at the nearby footage. There were no other people in that hallway during that time. No staff or other guests. Only the two sisters. And then it went blank. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. The ship was far from land. Even if someone had taken them, where could they have gone? There were no missing lifeboats. No one reported falling off the ship. The search and rescue teams didn't find anything in the water. It felt like the girls had disappeared into another world. Brennan didn't believe in the impossible, but he also thought coincidences were unlikely. July 19th, 2007, 11:15 a.m., Florida. Brennan talked to Tyler Marsh at his family's home, which was a simple ranch-style house with an old American flag by the front door. Tyler was tall and thin, with a restless energy that made him seem younger than 17. His mom sat next to him on the couch, her hand gently on his knee. Brennan asked what his relationship with Cynthia was like. Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "She's incredible, smart, funny, way better than me. I really don't know why she liked me, to be honest." He showed Brennan their text messages on his phone. The last one from Cynthia was sent at 9:52 p.m. on July 14th. It said, "This Wi-Fi is terrible. I miss you. I'll call you when we get back." Brennan took a picture of the screen. Did she seem upset about anything? Worried? Scared? Tyler shook his head. Nope. She was really excited. She continued to send me images of the boat and the sea. She mentioned that Lena was making her a bit crazy by always being close by, but she didn't really care. Cynthia really cares about her sister. She would never let anything happen to her. His voice cracked. Where is she? Why can't anyone locate her? Brennan didn't know what to say. She thanked Tyler and his mom, then drove back to Miami with more questions than answers. July 23, 2007. Coast Guard Station, Miami Beach. The formal search was stopped. The Coast Guard released a statement. After searching air and sea over more than 200 square miles, we didn't find any signs that the Leslie sisters are in the water. We are now treating this case as a criminal matter and are working with the FBI. The news caught on to the story. Local news channels reported on it. Nancy Grace dedicated a whole episode to the case, throwing around theories about human trafficking and hidden crew quarters.
The Leslie family appeared on CNN, asking for information. Karen showed pictures of her daughters, her voice quiet. "If you have them, please, please just bring them home. We won't file any charges. We just want them back." David sat beside her, looking drained. He seemed like a man who hadn't rested in days. Behind them, a number for tips rolled across the screen. The tips flooded in. A woman in Atlanta said she saw two girls who looked like them at a truck stop. A man in Houston reported hearing crying from a shipping container at the harbor. A psychic from Oregon offered to connect with Lena's spirit. Every lead was checked, every tip looked into. None of them went anywhere. August 10th, 2007, 6:47 p.m. Leslie home, Tallahassee, Florida. Brennan came to see the family again, this time to give news she wished she didn't have to say. She sat in their living room, surrounded by pictures of Cynthia and Lena, school photos, birthday celebrations, a framed shot from the cruise taken at the gangway, the last picture of them together. Brennan took a big breath. We looked at Cynthia's phone. There's nothing odd. Her texts, her search history, her pictures, everything seems normal for a teenage girl. No warning signs, no chats with strangers, no trouble scene. Karen raised her eyes, a glimmer of hope shining in them. So that's a good sign, right? It means she didn't plan on escaping. Brennan paused for a moment.
Mrs. Leslie, I need to be truthful with you. We have looked everywhere we could think of. We have talked to the ship's crew several times. We have reached out to the passengers. Our top analysts have reviewed the video footage. We found no signs of wrongdoing, but we also can't explain where your daughters have gone. David's tone was serious. What do you mean? Brennan looked him in the eyes. What I'm saying is that we aren't giving up, but at this moment, we don't have enough information to make an arrest or identify a clear suspect. The case is marked as unsolved until we find new evidence. Karen made a sound that was a mix of crying and yelling. David suddenly stood up and left the room. Brennan remained seated, feeling the burden of her failure. She had promised them answers. She had promised justice, and she hadn't provided either. But what Brennan didn't know was that 8 years later, a man named Raymond Cole would discover a VHS tape in a storage unit near Jacksonville, and everything would change. For now, though, the case became inactive. The file was placed in storage, the media moved on to other stories, leaving 2 empty bunk beds in Tallahassee untouched, still waiting for their owners to come back. In September 2007, in Tallahassee, Florida, the Leslie home turned into a memorial. Karen couldn't bring herself to change anything in the girls' shared room. Cynthia's posters of indie bands still hung on the walls. Lena's stuffed animals sat on the windowsill. The missing dolphin was a painful reminder among them. The bunk beds looked untouched. The pillows were fluffed as if they were hoping for the girls to return. David buried himself in his job, working 12 or even 14 hours a day. His coworkers whispered that he looked like he aged 10 years in just a month. His hair had started turning gray at the sides. His hands trembled when he held his coffee. At night, he would sit in his car in the driveway for an hour before going inside, trying to find the courage to face another night of solitude. Karen, on the other hand, stopped working altogether. She devoted her time to online discussions about missing kids, social media groups, and anywhere else where she could find someone who might have information. She made a ton of flyers and drove to Miami, Jacksonville, and Atlanta, putting them up on telephone poles and in shop windows. Most of them were taken down within a few days. Some shop owners asked her to stop putting them up. One gas station worker kindly told her, "Ma'am, you have to move on. Those girls are gone." Karen got angry and slapped him. The police took her out of the store, but she wasn't arrested. The officer who drove her home recognized her from TV. He didn't say anything, he just helped her into her car and made sure she left safely. In October 2007, the first memorial gathering was held at Myers Park in Tallahassee. 43 people showed up, including school friends, neighbors, and church members. Someone had set up a table with pictures of Cynthia and Lena surrounded by candles and flowers. A local pastor led a prayer. Karen stood at the front and couldn't find her words. David read a speech he had prepared, sounding robotic. "We will keep searching. We will keep believing. Our daughters are out there, and we will bring them home." But as years went by, fewer people came to the gatherings. The media lost interest. The tip line was silent. By the second anniversary, just 8 people were there. By the third, only David and Karen were left in the park, lighting 2 candles and watching the flames dance in the evening wind. In January 2009, Special Agent Nicole Brennan had been reassigned twice since the Leslie case. She worked on kidnapping cases in Atlanta, then on child exploitation cases in Washington, D.C., but she kept the Leslie case file in her personal records and reviewed it occasionally, hoping to spot something she had missed. She'd call David and Karen during holidays to check in. Each time, the conversations became shorter.
There was less to talk about and less hope to give. However, Brennan couldn't shake the feeling that she had let them down. She believed there was an answer somewhere in the footage, witness statements, or passenger list that she overlooked. She started contacting retired crew members from the Caribbean Dream, tracking them down using job records and social media. Most didn't want to talk to her. Some hung up as soon as she introduced herself. One past steward, a woman called Clarice Vaughn, agreed to have coffee with me in Fort Lauderdale. Clarice was now in her 60s, her hands had age spots, and her voice was rough from years of smoking. She slowly mixed her coffee while saying, "I remember those girls. Everybody does. It was the worst thing that ever took place on that ship." Brennan leaned in closer. "Did you notice anything strange that night? Anything the investigators might have overlooked?" Clarice paused for a moment. "There was a crew member, Raymond Cole. He had been working with the company for about 8 months. He was a quiet person who kept to himself, but after the girls went missing, he left. He just walked off the ship in Nassau and never returned." Brennan's heart raced. "Did you tell someone about this?" Clarice looked down. "I brought it up to the captain. He said Raymond had family problems and needed to go home. He didn't think it was connected to the disappearances. And honestly, I didn't think so either at the time." Brennan took out her notebook. "Do you know where Raymond is now?" Clarice shook her head. "No idea. I heard he moved back to Georgia, somewhere near Brunswick, but that was many years ago. He could be anywhere now." Brennan thanked her, then quickly asked for a background check on Raymond Cole. The results came back in 48 hours. Raymond Cole, who was 34 when the girls went missing, had no criminal record. He had worked for 3 different cruise lines between 2005 and 2007. After he left the Caribbean Dream, he went to Brunswick, Georgia, worked at a marina for 6 months, and then disappeared from all public records. There was no job history, no tax returns, and no social media activity. It was like he had disappeared, just like the girls. Brennan asked for a warrant to check property records in Georgia. There was nothing listed under Raymond Cole's name, but she found something different. An extra storage unit in Jacksonville was rented under the name R. Cole, paid for in cash every year. The rental had been active since 2008. Brennan got in touch with the Jacksonville office and asked for surveillance on that unit. In March 2010, the storage facility was a large area of orange metal units located on the edge of Jacksonville close to the airport. Brennan waited in an unmarked car with Agent Marcus Liu, watching the entrance with binoculars. They had stayed there for 3 days. Nobody had entered or left Unit 247. On the 4th day, just after lunch, a man came up to the gate. He was skinny, looked tired, and wore an old Braves cap pulled down low over his face. He entered the access code and drove a rusty pickup truck to the back row. Brendan and Lou followed him on foot, making sure to keep their distance. The man parked right in front of Unit 247, looked around nervously, and then opened the roll-up door. Brennan's heart raced. She called for backup and then stepped forward, displaying her badge. "Raymond Cole, FBI, we need to talk." The man stopped suddenly. For a moment, Brennan thought he might run away, but then he slumped his shoulders and turned to look at her. His eyes were empty and had dark circles under them. He seemed like someone who hadn't slept in a long time. "I knew you would come sooner or later," he said softly. Inside the unit, among boxes filled with old clothes and tools, there was a cardboard box marked Caribbean Dream 2007. Raymond opened it with trembling hands and pulled out a VHS tape. "I should have given this to the cops a long time ago," he said, "but I was scared. I thought they would blame me. I thought I would end up in jail." Brennan took the tape carefully, as if it could break. "What's on this?" Raymond's voice cracked. "The truth. March 12th, 2010, FBI office, Jacksonville." The tape was old, the quality was poor, but the images were clear enough. It showed security footage from a part of the ship that wasn't in the official evidence files. It was from an outside camera placed by the crew-only stairway on the starboard side, looking at a narrow path that led to the access of the engine room. The timestamp showed July 14th, 2007, at 10:03 p.m. Cynthia and Lena appeared on the screen, walking slowly and talking. Lena was pointing at something that wasn't on camera. Cynthia laughed and shook her head. Then a figure came out of the shadows. It was a crew member in uniform. He walked up to the girls, talked for a moment, and pointed toward the stairway. Cynthia seemed uncertain. The man said something else and smiled. Lena nodded with excitement. Cynthia looked uncertain, but followed. The 3 of them went down the stairway. Brennan felt sick. She paused the tape and zoomed in on the crew member's face.
It was blurry, but she could see some features. Dark hair, clean-shaven, and a name tag that was partially visible on his uniform. She improved the picture as much as she could and used facial recognition software on it. The results came back in just a few minutes. Crew ID, Thomas Gaines. Job, assistant engineer. Age, 29. Where he is now is unknown. Brennan looked at Gaines' sob records. He had worked for the cruise company for 2 years before the Leslie incident. After the ship arrived in Nassau, he had sent his resignation through email, saying it was due to a family emergency. He never came back to pick up his last paycheck. His last known home was in Boca Raton, Florida. A warrant was issued right away. In April 2010, Boca Raton police surrounded a small duplex on a peaceful street filled with palm trees. Thomas Gaines was living there under his real name and was employed as a maintenance supervisor at a nearby apartment building. When the officers broke down the door, they found him sitting calmly at his kitchen table, almost like he was waiting for them. He didn't fight back and didn't ask for a lawyer. He just looked at the main officer and said it was an accident. Brennan got there within a few hours. She sat across from Gaines in the interrogation room, her hands resting on the table, speaking in a cold tone. "Tell me what happened." Gaines confessed in a flat, emotionless voice. He had been working a double shift that night. Tired, he went outside for some fresh air and saw the 2 girls by the crew stairwell. Lena had lost something, a bracelet, and it rolled toward a restricted area. He offered to help him get it back. They followed him down, but the stairwell was dim and the steps were steep. Lena tripped. Cynthia tried to grab her, and in the confusion, both girls fell. Gaines said he panicked. He mentioned checking for pulses and not finding any. He was scared about losing his job, being blamed, and going to jail, so he hid the bodies in a maintenance storage room, weighed them down with tools, and late that night, when the ship was far from land, he threw them overboard. Brennan felt her hands turn numb. She felt like smashing something. But instead, she stood up, thanked Gaines for helping her, and left. Once outside, she sat in her car in the parking lot and called David Leslie. When he picked up, she said, "We found him." April 18th, 2010, 9:34 a.m., Leslie's house, Tallahassee, Florida. David Leslie dropped the phone. It hit the hard floor and made a loud noise that resonated through the empty home. Meanwhile, Karen was in the kitchen cleaning dishes that were already spotless, a habit she had to keep her hands occupied and her mind away from heavy thoughts. When she heard the crash, she turned off the tap. "David?" Her voice was small and frightened. He appeared in the doorway, looking pale. For a moment, he couldn't say anything. His mouth opened and closed a couple of times. At last he spoke. "They found him. The guy who took them, he admitted it." Karen's legs gave way. She held on to the counter to keep from falling. "Are they okay?" David shook his head slowly. The sound that came from Karen was otherworldly. It was like something fragile breaking forever. She fell to the kitchen floor, shaking with sobs that seemed to come from deep inside her. David wanted to go to her, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He slid down the wall and sat there, staring blankly, while his wife cried next to him. The girls were gone, not just missing or lost. They were gone. After 3 years of hoping, praying, and pleading with anyone who would listen, they finally got their answer, and it was the one they feared the most. April 20th, 2010, 2:15 p.m., FBI office, Jacksonville, Florida. Special Agent Nicole Brennan sat opposite Thomas Gaines in the same room where he had confessed 2 days earlier. This time, she had some lawyers with her, recording everything he said and preparing notes for the prosecutor. Gaines looked like a different person. His calm demeanor was gone, his hands shook slightly as he rested them on the table. Dark circles were under his eyes. The guard said he hadn't slept. He just sat in his cell, staring at the wall and sometimes whispering things they couldn't really hear. Brennan opened the file slowly and carefully. "I want to go over this again, Thomas, step by step. I need to know exactly what took place that night."
Gaines nodded. His tone already revealed a lot. "Please tell me again," Brennan said seriously. Gaines took a deep breath. "I was doing a double shift. We were short on staff. Since noon, I had been in the engine room checking the coolant systems for routine upkeep. Around 10 p.m., I decided to go up for some fresh air. I was really tired. I wasn't thinking clearly." He stopped for a moment and rubbed his face. "I noticed the two girls. They were on the outside walkway close to the crew stairs. The younger girl was kneeling down, looking at something on the ground. The older one stood behind her, looking at her phone." Brennan wrote this down. "What happened next?" "The younger girl noticed me. She smiled and said she lost her bracelet and it rolled toward a restricted area. She asked if I could help her find it. I said, sure. I wasn't thinking clearly. I should have just called security and let them take care of it, but I was tired and it seemed innocent." His voice shook. "So I opened the stairs door and we went down." Brennan leaned closer.
Ever since he admitted the truth, he hadn't said much. He stopped going to his job and even stopped eating. He spent hours in the girl's room, holding Nina's dolphin toy and looking at Cynthia's posters. Judith reached over the desk and grabbed Karen's hand. "I know this seems really hard, but we're going to work for the toughest punishment we can get, and the judge will listen to what you have to say about how this has affected you. You'll get a chance to explain to the court what this has taken from you." Karen pulled her hand back. "What it has taken from us? It has taken everything. Our daughters, our marriage, our lives. There is nothing left." She suddenly stood up and walked out. David quietly followed her. May 2010. The news media flooded Jacksonville like a swarm of insects. The story had everything you could think of: missing kids, a cruise ship, and admission of guilt. Years later, cable news featured reports about it every night. The tragedy in the Caribbean became known as a shorthand for this event. Journalists set up camp outside the Leslie home. David put in a security camera and stopped opening the door. Karen did one interview with a local reporter she had known since she was in school. She sat in the living room, filled with pictures, and spoke in a flat tone. "I want people to understand who my daughters were. Cynthia was brilliant, really brilliant. She wanted to study marine biology. She loved the ocean." Karen's voice broke. "And Lena was just a ray of sunshine. She made everyone around her happy. She drew pictures for her teachers and left little notes in my purse saying she loved me." The reporter softly asked, "What do you hope will happen to Thomas Gaines?" Karen looked straight at the camera. "I want him to feel the same pain we have felt. I want him to wake up every day knowing what he took from us, and I want him to never forget their faces." The interview spread all over the internet. Within days, a petition on change.org asking for a harsher punishment for Gaines got over 200,000 signatures. People protested outside the courthouse, holding signs that said, "Justice for Cynthia and Lena, and life for a life." The pressure grew. The prosecutor added more charges. There were 2 counts of abuse of a corpse, gross negligence, and criminal endangerment. Together, these charges could lead to a sentence of 35 years. It wasn't murder, but it was still serious. June 2010. The court date was scheduled for October. Gaines's lawyer tried to work out a deal, but Vasquez said no. "We're going to court. The families need their chance to be heard." Brennan didn't stop her investigation, hoping to uncover more information. She spoke to every crew member from the Caribbean Dream that she could find. She looked at engineering logs, maintenance records, and passenger complaints. She discovered something minor, but important. 3 weeks before the Leslie sisters vanished, another passenger had lodged a complaint about Thomas Gaines, saying he had followed her teenage daughter to the pool late at night and asked inappropriate questions. The complaint had been recorded but not taken further. The crew supervisor called it a mix-up. Brennan included it in the evidence file. It wasn't proof that Gaines committed murder, but it showed a worrying pattern.
And as the hot summer days in Florida continued and the trial date drew near, Brennan made a promise to herself. She would attend every day of the trial. She wanted to see Gaines face the families he had hurt, and she would ensure that Cynthia and Lena Leslie would not be forgotten. On October 4th, 2010, at 9 a.m. at the Duval County Courthouse in Jacksonville, Florida, the courtroom was full. Every seat in the room was taken, and reporters were packed together in the back. Special artists were arranged along the walls. The air conditioning was struggling with so many people in one place. Special Agent Nicole Brennan was sitting in the third row, right behind the lawyers for the prosecution. She got there an hour early to get a good seat. To her left was Marcus Liu, the agent who had been with her when they arrested Raymond Cole at the storage unit. To her right was an empty chair she had saved. At 9:15, David and Karen Leslie came in through the side door. They were accompanied by a victim's advocate, and the crowd hushed. Karen wore a plain black dress with her hair tightly pulled back. David's suit looked baggy on him. He had lost about 30 pounds since April. They took their seats in the front row, right across from where Thomas Gaines would be. Karen kept her gaze straight ahead, while David looked at his hands. At 9:30, the bailiff called the court to order. Everyone stood up. The Honorable Judge Patricia Moreno is in charge. Judge Moreno was a strict woman in her mid-50s, recognized for managing her courtroom carefully and being quick to lose patience with drama. She sat down, looked over the audience with keen eyes, and nodded for the bailiff to proceed. "Bring in the defendant." Thomas Gaines walked in wearing handcuffs and was accompanied by 2 deputies. He had on a gray suit that didn't fit him well, given to him by his lawyer. His hair had been cut very short. He looked smaller, as if the heaviness of his actions had made him shrink somehow. He avoided looking at the Leslie family as he took his seat. The charges were read aloud: 2 counts of manslaughter, 2 counts of abuse of a corpse, blocking justice, tampering with evidence, and criminal endangerment.
Gaines said he was not guilty. The prosecutor suggested he should accept a plea deal, but his public defender, a young guy named Marcus Webb, convinced him they could argue that the deaths were just accidents and that what Gaines did afterward, while wrong, wasn't serious enough to be manslaughter. It was a risky choice, and the prosecutor, Elena Vasquez, was ready to make him regret it. October 5, 2010, marked the second day of the trial. Vasquez's opening statement was precise and to the point. She stood before the jury of 12 men and women who had spent the last week being interviewed and chosen. She didn't need to raise her voice. On July 14, 2007, 2 young girls got on the Caribbean Dream with their parents. Cynthia Leslie was 16 and loved indie music, dreaming of studying marine biology. Leanna Leslie was 11, a fan of stuffed animals, and enjoyed drawing. Vasquez clicked a remote, and pictures appeared on a screen on the wall. They showed school pictures, Cynthia smiling with braces, and Leanna missing her 2 front teeth. These kids were thrilled. It was their first cruise. Their dad had just received a promotion, and they were celebrating a typical family trip. But it turned into a nightmare because one man chose to think of himself instead of the 2 girls. She looked directly at Gaines. He kept his gaze down. Thomas Gaines might say this was an accident, that the girls fell and he panicked. Perhaps the fall was indeed an accident. But what happened afterward was not. What happened afterward was a series of planned and intentional choices. He concealed their bodies. He weighed them down. He tossed them into the sea like trash. Then he took off. Vasquez took a moment to let everything sink in. For 3 years, the Leslie family was left unsure if their daughters were still alive or not. For those 3 years, they held on to hope. All that time, Thomas Gaines knew what had really happened. He was fully aware of where those girls were, and he chose to stay silent. She returned to the prosecution side, her voice softer now, but somehow stronger. The defense will try to make you feel sorry for Mr. Gaines, to understand his fear and panic, but I want you to think about who truly deserves your compassion. 2 girls who will never grow up, never finish school, never find love, never start families, and 2 parents who will spend their lives wondering what their daughters went through in their final moments. They are the ones who deserve your sympathy." Karen Leslie was crying quietly, shaking as she held back tears. David had his arm around her, his jaw so tight it looked painful. The defense's opening remarks were brief and more careful. Marcus Webb stood up and spoke to the jury earnestly. "This is a tragic situation, that's for sure. 2 young lives were lost, and my client has to carry that burden forever. But just because it is a tragedy does not mean it is a crime. Thomas Gaines did not mean for those girls to die. He didn't push them or hurt them. They fell. It was a horrible, awful accident. Afterward, yes, he made some bad choices that came from fear and confusion, but those choices don't make him a killer." He stopped to look at the jury. "The prosecution wants you to believe Thomas Gaines is a monster, but that isn't true. He is a person who made a terrible mistake and then made it worse by trying to save himself. That doesn't excuse his actions, but it does help us understand them. The law asks us to tell the difference between intentional harm and tragic accidents. I urge you to keep that difference in mind as you listen to the evidence." It wasn't a strong opening, and Brennan could see that on the faces of the jurors. They were not convinced. On October 6th and 12th, 2010, witness statements were gathered. Vasquez carefully built her argument. She brought in the ship's captain, Robert Finch, who spoke about the safety rules on the ship and made it clear that the stairs where the girls fell were only for crew members. Next, she called the main Coast Guard investigator, who talked about the thorough search they conducted and admitted they didn't find any sign of the girls in the water. She also called Raymond Cole, a former deckhand who had the VHS tape. He shared how he found the tape and how scared he was to speak up, mentioning the guilt he felt for years. Then they played the tape for the jury. The room became quiet as the blurry video showed Thomas Gaines talking to Cynthia and Leanna and leading them toward the stairs. Karen Leslie walked out of the courtroom. She couldn't bear to see it. David stayed behind, gripping the armrest so tight it looked painful. Vasquez called in forensic specialists who explained the blood found on the stair railings. The DNA experts confirmed that the samples belonged to Cynthia and Leanna. A biomechanics expert gave details on the fall, stating that a drop of 12 feet onto metal could seriously hurt someone, especially a child. On October 12th, Vasquez brought in her last witness, Special Agent Nicole Brennan. Brennan seated herself and took an oath. Vasquez guided her through the investigation, starting from the first report of the girls missing to discovering Gaines's storage and leading to his arrest and confession. "Agent Brennan," Vasquez asked, "with your 12 years of experience with the FBI, do you believe what Thomas Gaines said about that night?" Brennan faced the jury directly and said, "I believe the girls fell. That part was an accident. But I also think Mr. Gaines had many chances to help them, or at least to give their families answers. He didn't do it. He thought of himself first." The defense tried to shake her confidence during questioning, claiming she was biased and that she came to a conclusion too soon, ignoring evidence against it. Brennan stood firm, saying, "I followed the evidence. The evidence pointed to Thomas Gaines, and his own confession proved it." On October 13th and 15th, 2010, the defense presented their case. Marcus Webb called Thomas Gaines to testify. It was a bold choice, but Marcus didn't have many choices. Gaines needed to show the jury that he was just a normal person and not some terrible villain. He spoke for 6 hours over 2 days.
He went over his story again and again, helping the jury understand everything clearly. He cried multiple times. He glanced at the Leslie family and said, "I'm really sorry. I know that might not mean much, but I truly am. I think about them all the time." Webb tried to convince everyone that he was a victim of bad luck, a regular guy with a clean record who made a horrible mistake when he panicked. But during cross-examination, Vasquez tore his argument apart. "Mr. Gaines, you said you checked the girls for signs of life and found none. Is that right?" "Yes." And you have no background in medicine?
No.
So how can you be sure they were dead?
Gaines paused. They weren't breathing. They weren't moving.
But you didn't call a doctor? You didn't use the ship's emergency medical system? You didn't even try to perform CPR. You just thought they were dead and decided to hide the bodies. Is that correct?
Gaines answered in a soft voice. Yes.
In fact, Mr. Gaines, for all you know, the girls could have still been alive when you threw them into the sea. Isn't that a possibility? The courtroom became loud. Judge Moreno slammed her gavel. Order! Gaines was trembling.
I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
Karen Leslie cried loudly. David put his hands over his face. Vasquez continued to push hard. You said you panicked, but your actions look very planned to me. You put the bodies in a locked storage space. You waited until late at night. You used cargo straps to weigh them down. You threw them into deep water where you knew they'd be hard to find. That's not panic, Mr. Gaines. That's a planned action. I was scared. You were scared about getting caught, not scared for those girls, not thinking about how their parents would feel, scared for yourself. Objection, Webb said faintly. That's argumentative. Sustained, Judge Moreno replied. Rephrase. Vasquez nodded. Mr. Gaines, how long did it take you to get rid of the bodies? I'm not sure. Maybe 30 minutes. 30 minutes. And during those 30 minutes, did you see Cynthia and Lena Leslie as real people, as daughters to someone, or did you just see them as a problem that you had to fix? Gaines didn't respond. Vasquez looked at the jury. No more questions. October 18, 2010. Final statements. Vasquez's final words were powerful. She reminded the jury of every little thing Gaines had done. She displayed the pictures of Cynthia and Lena again, their happy faces on the screen. These girls trusted Thomas Gaines. They followed him because he was an adult in a uniform, and he brought them to their doom. Maybe he didn't plan for them to fall, but he definitely intended to hide it. He wanted to prevent their family from getting closure. He aimed to protect himself. And that's why he is guilty, ladies and gentlemen. Webb's final words were shorter and more desperate. He pleaded with the jury to understand the difference between an accident and something that was planned. He reminded them that there was a bit of doubt, but Brennan could tell from their expressions. They had already made their choice. October 19, 2010, 4:37 p.m. After 2 days of discussions, the jury came back. The foreman stood up. For the charge of manslaughter in Cynthia Leslie's death, we find the defendant guilty. For the charge of manslaughter in Lena Leslie's death, we find the defendant guilty. For all other charges, we find the defendant guilty. Thomas Gaines fell back in his chair. Karen Leslie cried. David shut his eyes and breathed out like it was the first time in 3 years. The sentencing was set in November, but for now there was a little bit of justice. Guilty. That word rang in the courtroom like a bell. Chapter 6. Justice in Remembrance. November 8, 2010, 10 a.m., Albert A. Duval Courthouse, Jacksonville, Florida. Sentencing day. The courtroom felt different now, more silent. There were fewer media people. Only a few reporters were left, keeping their cameras respectfully at the back. The lively and chaotic feeling of the trial had changed to a mood that was much more serious and heavy. This was the moment when the Leslie family would finally share their words. David and Karen were in the front row again, but this time Karen had a folder resting on her lap. Inside it were pictures, letters and drawings that Lena had done when she was in elementary school. There were report cards, birthday cards, and every little item that showed her daughters had lived, had been important, and had been loved. Judge Moreno walked in, and everyone in the room stood up. They brought in Thomas Gaines, who looked weak and tired. He had lost weight while in jail, and his suit looked even baggier than it did before. He sat there without looking at anyone, with his hands resting on the table in front of him. "We are here for the sentencing in the case of the state of Florida versus Thomas Gaines," Judge Moreno started. "Before I give the sentence, the families of the victims have the chance to speak to the court. Mrs. Leslie, you can go ahead." Karen stood up slowly, her legs shaking, but she pushed herself to walk to the stand. David stood up with her, positioning himself just behind her left side, placing a gentle hand on her back. For a moment, Karen couldn't find her voice. She looked down at the pages she had prepared, the words she had written and rewritten countless times. Then she glanced at Thomas Gaines, who still wouldn't look her way. "My daughters meant everything to me," Karen started, her voice trembling. "Cynthia was very smart. She read 3 books every week. She would correct her teachers when they made mistakes about marine biology. She wanted to protect the oceans.
She used to tell me that sharks weren't the terrible monsters people thought they were, and that humans were the real threat." Her voice broke. "She was right. The ocean didn't take my daughter away, you did." Gaines flinched but didn't lift his gaze. Karen went on, tears now streaming down her face. Lena was full of happiness. She woke up each morning eager for the day ahead. She made friends wherever we went, at grocery stores, parks, and doctors' offices. She would talk to anyone. She believed there was something good in everyone. She believed in you. The room was quiet, except for Karen's shaky voice. She had faith in you. They both did have faith in you. You were in a police uniform. Your job was to protect them, but instead you took them away from us. You took away their futures. Cynthia won't get to go to college. She won't become a marine biologist. She won't get married or have kids. Lena won't finish middle school. She won't learn how to drive. She won't find love. Karen held tightly onto the podium. But you did more than just end their lives. You robbed us of 3 years filled with hope. 3 years where we wondered if they were being kept somewhere, if they were in pain, if they were calling out for us. 3 years filled with nightmares and prayers filled with desperation. And you knew. You knew where they were all along, but you stayed silent. She fixed her gaze on Gaines. "I will never forgive you. It's not because I am cruel, but because what you did is something I can't forgive. You had many chances to do the right thing, to ask for help, to tell the truth, to give back our daughters so we could lay them to rest and say goodbye. But you put yourself first every time." Karen's voice became just a soft murmur. "I hope you see their faces each night when you go to sleep. I hope you can hear Lena's laughter. I hope you remember Cynthia's smile, because we do every day and we always will." She stepped back. David supported her when her knees gave way and helped her back to their seats. Then David approached the podium. He hadn't written anything down. He stood there for a long time, staring at Gaines, his jaw moving slightly. When he finally talked, his voice was firm and cold. "I am a father. My main responsibility was to keep my kids safe, and I didn't. I let them go that evening. I agreed when I should have said no. I have to live with that for my whole life." He paused for a moment. "But you, Mr. Gaines, made your own choice too. You decided to lead 2 kids into a risky place. You chose not to help them when they were in trouble. You decided to hide them, to disregard them, and then you ran away while we suffered." David's hands tightened into fists. "My wife and I no longer have a marriage. We are 2 people sharing the same home, deeply hurt. Whenever we look at each other, all we see is our loss. Our daughter's room is still exactly how she left it. We can't bring ourselves to change anything about it. It feels like a memorial to a life that was taken away because of you."
He took a breath. "I don't believe in hell, Mr. Gaines, but if I did, it would make me feel better to think you would end up there. For now, I can only accept that you will live many years in prison, facing what you did. That isn't enough. It can never be enough. But it's something." David stepped down without saying anything else. Judge Moreno gave them both a moment to absorb what had just happened, then turned to Thomas Gaines. "Mr. Gaines, do you want to speak to the court?" Gaines stood up slowly. His lawyer put a hand on his arm as if to stop him, but Gaines shook his head. He needed to say something. He looked straight at the Leslie family. For the first time since the trial started, he met their eyes. "Mr. and Mrs. Leslie, I realize my words won't mean anything to you. I know nothing I say can change what has happened. But I want you to understand that I am really sorry. I think about Cynthia and Lena every day. I can see their faces. I can hear their voices. I wish I could go back and make better choices. I wish I had called for help. I wish I had told the truth." His voice broke. "I was a coward. I was thinking only of myself. Because of that, 2 lovely girls are gone, and you have gone through so much pain. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I am truly, sincerely sorry." He sat down. Karen didn't react. David stared ahead blankly. Judge Moreno opened the sentencing documents. "Mr. Gaines, I have been in charge of many tough cases, but this one will stick with me. What you did, whether it was negligence, panic, or cowardice, led to the deaths of 2 children and shattered a family. Your actions after their deaths were planned and heartless. You chose your freedom over their dignity and their family's right to the truth." She paused, her tone becoming firmer.
For the manslaughter of Cynthia Leslie, I sentence you to 15 years in a state prison. On the charge of manslaughter in Lena Leslie's death, I give you a sentence of 15 years, which will be served one after the other. For the other charges, there will be an extra 8 years, also served one after the other. In total, you will spend 38 years in the Florida prison system without a chance for early release. The judge made the decision for 38 years. Thomas Gaines would be 72 when he would finally be released. The officers moved in to take him away. As he walked past the Leslie family, Karen suddenly stood up. "Hold on." Everyone stopped. Karen stepped closer until she was almost standing next to Gaines. "I want you to remember this. Each day you are in prison, my daughters will still be missing. Every birthday, every Christmas, and every plain Tuesday, they will be gone, and it is because of you. Don't ever forget that." Gaines looked crushed. "I won't forget. I promise." Karen turned away. The officers escorted him out. In November 2010, in Tallahassee, in the weeks that followed the sentencing, David and Karen worked on adjusting to their new life. They went to grief counseling together, sitting in hard chairs in a therapist's office, trying to express pain that felt impossible to put into words. They became part of a support group for parents who lost children to murder. But Karen stopped going after the 3rd meeting. Listening to other people's stories made her own sadness feel even heavier. David eventually returned to work part-time. His co-workers were very kind, treating him delicately, as if he might break at any moment. He appreciated their kindness, but he didn't like needing it. He wished to feel normal again, but deep down, he knew that wouldn't happen. Karen began volunteering at a local children's hospital, the same place she had worked as a nurse before the girls went missing. She read stories to sick children, held their hands during medical procedures, and brought them coloring books and stuffed animals. It didn't fill the emptiness inside her, nothing could, but it gave her something to focus on. On December 14, 2010, the day that would have been Lena's 12th birthday, which she never got to celebrate, David and Karen drove to Myers Park,
the place where they had held vigils in the years before the trial. They planned something different for this occasion. With support from the city council and gifts from local people, a memorial was created. It was close to the playground where Lena liked to play. A simple bench made of granite with a bronze sign. It read, "In loving memory of Cynthia Marie Leslie, 1991-2007, and Lena Rose Leslie, 1996-2007. Cherished daughters and sisters who left us too early but will always be remembered. May their light keep shining in the hearts of those who loved them." Around the bench, volunteers planted 2 young dogwood trees, which were Cynthia's favorite. They would bloom white and pink in the spring. More than 100 people showed up for the dedication ceremony. Friends, family, classmates, teachers, and community members who had followed the case and felt a connection to the girls, even if they had never met them. A local pastor offered a prayer. Karen and David placed flowers on the bench. Then people took turns sharing their memories. Tyler Marsh, Cynthia's boyfriend and now a college freshman, shared how Cynthia inspired him to improve himself. A girl who used to be in Lena's class read a poem she had written about friendship. Agent Nicole Brennan stayed at the back of the crowd, quietly observing. She drove up from Jacksonville, wanting to be there and to see that something good could come from something so tragic. As the sun went down and the crowd started to leave, David and Karen stayed at the bench, holding hands. For the first time in 3 years, they sat together in a peaceful silence. Karen rested her head on David's shoulder. "Do you think they know we are still here, still fighting for them?" David tightened his grip on her hand. "I believe they know we love them. That's what matters most." They stayed there until the stars appeared, until the park lights turned on, and until the chill pushed them back to their car. But before leaving, Karen added one more thing to the bench. It was Lena's stuffed dolphin, the one she took on the cruise, the one that had been given back to them in an evidence bag. Now it sat there, worn and faded, but still smiling and keeping watch over the memorial. Epilogue. 2015, 5 years after the sentencing. The Leslie case brought about major changes in the safety rules for cruise ships. The law about security and safety on cruise ships was made stronger. This means there are better surveillance systems, improved lighting in restricted areas, and required reporting for incidents. Cynthia and Lena's names were brought up in congressional meetings. Their story sparked changes. David and Karen ended their relationship, but it wasn't because they were angry. It was a necessity. They cared for each other, but their sorrow was too much to handle together. They needed time apart to heal. However, they remained connected, chatting every week and meeting at the memorial on special days like birthdays and anniversaries. Agent Nicole Brennan got promoted to a supervising special agent and kept working on old cases. She kept a picture of Cynthia and Lena at her desk to remind her why she worked on these cases. Thomas Gaines was still in prison and was seen as a good inmate by everyone. He taught GED classes to other inmates and sent letters to the Leslie family each year on the anniversary of the girls' deaths. These letters were never read. Karen gave them away unopened to a victims' rights group. And under 2 dogwood trees in Myers Park, which bloomed every spring, there was a granite bench as a memorial for 2 lives that were ended too soon, 2 families changed forever, and the truth that after so many years of silence finally came out. This truth didn't bring Cynthia and Lena back to life, but it helped them be remembered for who they truly were. Not as victims or part of a sad story, but as 2 girls who loved dolphins, indie music, and coloring books. 2 girls who laughed, dreamed, and were important. In the end, they changed the world just by being loved. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video if you like true crime stories. Your support helps shine a light on cases that might be forgotten.
Which cold case do you think needs more attention? Leave a comment below. Every unsolved case is a family still waiting for answers and hoping for the peace that the Martinez family finally found after nearly 50 years of searching.